Hey folks, welcome to episode 4 of the Skooliepalooza podcast. I am currently sitting in southern Idaho as you can get. I mean, we're about 3 miles from the Nevada border. We turn north a little bit soon and we're enjoying the snow. On this podcast, we have Charlie and Dale of the Van Conversion Bible, which I did actually purchase. Their publisher didn't send it to me. And the first thing I noticed was the mistakes. So we'll get into those in a little bit. Other than that, Charlie, Dale, please introduce yourselves.
Yes, I'm Dale, and this is Charlie.
Hey. And we are the authors of the Van Conversion Bible, and we'll start from there.
We'll start from there.
Yeah, let's start from the. Well, first, where are you currently? Because Skooliepalooza, by far the majority of traffic and listeners and all that are in North America, and Singapore. Oddly, I don't know why. Our number 1 is North America. Our number 2 is Singapore. But please, where are you currently?
Yeah, so currently we are in Patagonia on the Argentinian side. But we've come all the way from North America. So we shipped our van from the UK over to Canada, went on a horrendously inefficient route across the whole of the US, and then we've gradually come down through Mexico and over to South America to, pretty much the bottom of South America now.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are your plans like in the future? You just going to work your way back up, or are you going to ship yourselves back to the island, or what?
Yeah, so our kind of plans are, this is a kind of year-long stint, this trip. So we've got a couple of months left, and then we are heading back up to Uruguay, and we ship our van back to the UK in May. And then we're going to have a summer in the UK because it's been about 3 years until we've spent any time really in the UK. And then as soon as it starts getting cold, we'll be back out to Europe again.
So you're going to go to the UK for summer, which lasts like 3 weeks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that, yeah.
We're going for 3 weeks, then we're going to leave. That's the second the rain starts.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the airport in London, but I've been to Ireland, and it was beautiful and it was lovely, but there wasn't a day that it didn't rain at least a little bit.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, we're not the best British Tourist Board representatives, but yeah, it can be a little bit rainy.
Yeah, we have spent far too much time outside of the UK. We don't remember quite how bad it is, and then when you get back, it's like, oh yeah, this is how it is. It really can rain every single day throughout.
Kind of like this is why we left.
Yeah.
What I will caveat with this is that, particularly up in Scotland, like west coast of Scotland, if you get it on a good day in summer, one of, if not the prettiest place we've ever been.
Yeah.
So it's maybe worth the risk.
Yeah, I used to be a big backpacker, and Amanda, who's actually in our studio, because our studio is a 6-window school bus, is here as well. But when we went to Ireland, we considered going to Scotland and actually backpacking in Scotland. And then I did some research, and every single video and every single blog and every single article about backpacking in Scotland was, you're going to get wet no matter what you're wearing, no matter how waterproof you think it is, it's not waterproof. So you need to embrace that. And so we haven't backpacked in Scotland.
There's a real fine balance in Scotland as well, where I think in May, June, you sometimes get lucky and there's a couple of weeks of really good weather. And then basically after that point, the midges come out. And if you don't know what a midge is, it's like a much smaller than a mosquito, really tiny. And when they're there, there's millions of them. And they don't hurt, but they're just deeply annoying.
It's the worst form of torture, really.
And when you don't have the midges, then you have the rain and the wind. So yeah, if you can get that 2-week window at some point in the year, that's the time to go, but it's always impossible to tell when that's going to be.
It does seem to be.
Fair enough. Well, so, we want to talk about the book a little bit. But first, I mean, the book is interesting, and obviously we want you to be able to sell some copies of it. It is a good book, but more importantly is your story a bit. So, a couple of Europeans, and this is actually not a novel thing. It's funny. I've been all over Europe, and I've been to China, and I've been to Russia, and one of the funny things is when I talk to Europeans, one of the things they'll do is compare like the States and Europe. And one of the things they'll say is like, you guys have nothing old. So why would we visit? And then we run into all these nomads who are like, well, we got to go to the States. So what got you into nomad life, and why did you decide to come? Well, now obviously you're down in South America, but why did you start in Canada? Why didn't you say ship? Well, I guess shipping the van would probably be cheaper to Canada than, say, Argentina. But, tell us a little bit about you and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So we were both working kind of 9 to 5 office jobs, commuting every day, and we were kind of happy enough doing that. Like, we had good friends, we lived in a nice city, and we would go out on the weekends to go kind of climbing and spend time outdoors. But we both always wanted to have this kind of mystical year off, and it was something that we both kind of talked about, and so the original start of our kind of van life kind of stemmed from this year off. We're going to have a year off, and so we converted the van whilst we were kind of working 9 to 5. So every weekend, every kind of bit of holiday we had, we would convert the van, and then just as we finished the conversion, I think like the week after, the UK went into the first lockdown. So it was fairly terrible timing for us. And we kind of put that year on pause because we didn't want the kind of uncertainty of the situation to kind of affect this year that we've been dreaming of for so long. And so instead, what we ended up doing is kind of throughout that conversion process, we've been documenting the build on like Instagram and a blog. And we just ended up getting a lot of questions. And so we spent a lot of the time, as everybody did, kind of stuck in the house, unable to go out, kind of at a bit of a loss of what to do. And we're not very good at not doing anything. And so instead of just having a bit of time to relax, we decided that instead of this year off, we were going to write a book. And so that was kind of where the book started, was kind of during COVID, when it wasn't possible to travel, and we just converted this van. And I think we felt like we needed to do something with this van that we just converted. And so that was the start of the book.
Yeah, I don't think there was really any motivations for it to be like a bestseller or to kind of stumble into being a business. It kind of just happened organically, but we would have been kind of quite happy if our mums would have bought the book, really. Yeah, there was nothing more to it than that, really. But it's whether if we liked it or not, it's kind of snowballed into a bit of a thing, and we've ended up building a business kind of essentially off the back of it as well. So we're still missing that year off, but we have had 3 years of kind of working nomadically, and we've probably been to 30-40 countries in that time.
I think what ended up happening was that everything kind of aligned all at the same time. So in April 2021, we quit our jobs, we moved into the van, we published the book all on almost the same day. We kind of just went all in. And at the start, I think in our heads, it was still just going to be this year off. But what actually ended up happening is within about 3 days, we were just actually working quite a lot. And it happened quite organically, as Dale said. The book kind of really took off. It performed really well, which was a really nice surprise. And then off the back of that, we kind of ended up starting our own business in this kind of camper van conversion world. We harnessed our skill set. My background's in physics and Dale's is in engineering, and we ended up kind of starting a business designing electrical systems for camper vans, so helping people who were self-building their own van. But this all kind of happened off the back of moving into the van and having the freedom to, I guess, like think and have the time to think about these sorts of things. Like, I'm sure it never would have happened headspace to kind of let these ideas develop. I think a lot of our business ideas have developed when we've been on long walks in the middle of nowhere and we suddenly start snowballing ideas between each other. But then very quickly it went from this idea of being a year off to, okay, well, this is just how we live now, because we'd happened to kind of be able to start a business that meant that we could kind of work from wherever and whenever we wanted. And so instead of it being a year off, it was like, okay, well, this is our life now, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's
the
first thing.
As a business person, so I have a day job, and I've owned a company since 1997. If you want to keep what you have now, do not get employees. And that's not in any way knocking employees. That's not what that's about. I love my team. Our team is fantastic. And frankly, the fact that we have the team allows us to do a lot of the things that we're doing now, like this. However, if you want the ability to take that long walk and settle your mind and allow the ideas to permeate, don't get employees. Because the moment you get employees, your life is not about you. It's about the employees and the families that you are responsible for. It's like having, not to sound patronizing, but it's not unlike having children. The moment you have children, your lives are about the children. So that would be like my one tip to you. One of the problems that Amanda and I have is when we're out and about, if we sit still too long, we end up working too much, because we were also driven individuals. So we were in northern Arizona in the Kebab National Forest, which is just south of, well, it's actually part of the Grand Canyon. And we were there for a couple of weeks, and we finally left because we realized we weren't hiking. We weren't taking time except to walk the dogs. We were working all the time instead of kind of settling down and enjoying the nomadic lifestyle.
I tell you what, we should have had this conversation 2 years ago. Because we're a team of 12 now.
Yeah.
So we're I can kind
we've sailed
relate
down that road.
Yeah. It's, I think,
all right. So you're in the same boat, so you understand. There's like just this. Yeah.
We need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're maybe now riding out the other side. I think we have this lovely ambition of, we're super busy, we've got way more than we could ever do, let's take someone on. But then that actually just creates more work and more work and more work. And I think we're finally starting to reach a point where we have people in all different areas of the business that you could possibly kind of have. There's engineering, there's accounts, we've got all of those kind of bases covered now. And I think we're finally coming out the other side where we can work less, travel more, and kind of achieve that that kind of original dream. I guess.
I think something that has been particularly difficult on this trip, so the previous 2 years, once we'd moved into the van, we were kind of traveling between the UK and Europe and a bit beyond to the Balkans. But for the past 12 months we've been out in the Americas. I think something that's been really difficult for us is this kind of balance between work and travel. And for us, travel is very climbing focused as well. We're both climbers and we like to spend a lot of time climbing. And so trying to balance climbing and travel and work has been difficult. And there's been a lot of things this year where we've had to make compromises, and maybe we haven't got to see some places that we would have liked to see, and we've definitely had to work more than we would have liked to work. But I think it's been a really valuable kind of opportunity to grow and to understand our strengths and our weaknesses and what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy. And I think, as Dale said, now we're kind of starting to get into that position where it does feel like we can perhaps work a bit less. And it also helps that we're now driving less. We've made it down to Patagonia, whereas a couple of months ago we were doing some fairly savage driving days to try and make it this far south before winter. But yeah, I think it's definitely a juggle, and I think that a lot of people probably look on Instagram and go, oh, that looks amazing, they're traveling all the time, that must be great. But I think there's also probably a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily want to do what we're doing, because we have what we have when we work and we have when we climb, and then we have a little bit of time to kind of explore and see things, and then we really don't have very much downtime. Like, I don't remember the last time I read a book or just kind of sat on the beach for a day. So yeah, there's ups and downs, but we definitely wouldn't check anything.
And it's always a balance, right? You have to have an equilibrium. Before we continue on this, though, because I have some thoughts here, I want to get back to the point you made in the pandemic. It's kind of a cultural difference, I think, in that, when the UK locked down, I mean, you guys locked down. I mean, they even made TV shows about it. Clarkson's Farm, right? It's whereas in the States, and again, cultural differences, Amanda and I were staring at each other, and it's funny, or not funny, but it's kind of interesting. We were about to run a conference in New York, and the organizers of the conference, we got together and we're like, so what are we going to do? Because we're pretty sure we're going to be at half attendance because of the pandemic. And we decided to cancel it out of just because we wouldn't have made any money. We would have lost our shirts, actually, if only half the people showed up. And a week later, they closed the border. So we were actually lucky in that they closed the border, so we got the act of God clause, and therefore we got our money back. But we only nomad about 7-8 months a year. We actually have property up in Northwest Washington. It's gorgeous property. And so we enjoy spring or late spring, summer, and early fall there. But we were sitting around and everything was shut down. And they were talking about essential travel, only travel if it's essential. And Amanda and I looked at each other and I said, well, it's essential we get the hell out of here. So we just left. We left, and our essential travel was all over the United States, and we found that we were in. It was actually just a lovely trip. I still had my eldest daughter with us, and it was like a last in a lifetime kind of situation. But so I do understand the idea of the pandemic, shifting. The only point that I bring it up is, two, because of the cultural differences between, say, the UK and the US, and two, because in the UK, I mean, obviously, there's not quite as, unless you have a boat, there's not quite as far as you can go, especially rurally, right? Right now I'm in the middle of Idaho. The only thing I can see is a power line and grass and snow. But back on the business thing, Dale, you said you think that you've finally gotten to the point where you might be able to work less. Here's my tip for that. You have that, and we've had that many times throughout our travels. But then what happens is one of you will have an idea, and then you'll explore the idea, and then you'll be working more because you're exploring the new idea. So just keep that in mind. The next time either of you, you see the light bulb go off on top of your head, you're like, what if? The moment you say what if, say to yourself, what is the result of what if that has nothing to do with that idea? And what that is you're working more, you're not climbing as much. Can't remember last time you read a book, just like you already said, those types of things. So that would be my tip on that, because we do it all the time. And we kind of had to basically settle ourselves into 3 or 4 core things that we do, and temper our ambition and enthusiasm for other things.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's a difficult thing to find balance with, for sure. I think there's obviously that necessity to work, or for the 99% at least there is. It's tricky, isn't it? How much is
it definitely is. I mean, and don't get me wrong, the employee thing is also a blessing because one, you can delegate.
Sure.
And two, I mean, there is a certain level of flexibility that you receive by being the boss, right? They can't really do anything if I reschedule a conference call, or at least not anything to me. They might swear at other people, but so there's definitely advantages to that. But I think that there's a certain, well, everything has a cost. Everything in life has a cost, and that's, in fact, in the schoolie community, a lot of people don't get this. Is that there's no such thing as, there's no actual such thing as a free lunch. You get people that say, well, we have a free life. Really? How are you paying for your fuel? How are you paying for your oil changes? And then they'll say, well, we do it ourselves. I said, okay, well, the cost is your time then, because everything you do has a cost on some level. It doesn't mean that there isn't a benefit, but it does have a cost. The cost of having employees is, at least if you're a good employer, is that you have a deep sense of responsibility to ensure that they are successful. And that means sometimes you don't get to go climbing, or you don't get to go on that hike, or you don't get to read that book, because you want to make sure that they're being successful, because their success is your success. You've been doing this for a while. I mean, you described how you went through the pandemic and you kind of lost that year and you finally got over the pond, as they say, and you went through Canada. What's the biggest challenge, or challenges that you've had from converting from your 9 to 5 to, say, your nomad life, and then being actual international travelers as well?
I think probably the biggest challenge is finding routine when there's actually nothing that really means you need to have any routine anymore. I think, like, say for example, like a holiday is a brilliant thing. You can completely shake up your routine, relax, and all of the rest of it. But I think, or certainly for us, if we lived in that kind of way and you never knew what you were going to do in the next 5 minutes, where you're going to sleep that night and the next day, it is actually kind of inherently quite stressful. So I think what we've kind of learned over the years of traveling is trying to create a loose plan and know roughly where you're going to stay, and try and spend a good amount of time in each place that you visit, rather than trying to see 1,000 things in 1,000 days. That for us it's just too much, and actually we kind of feel that you just don't see that much. You kind of go, oh, I've seen that, tick that off the list, and oh, I've seen that, I'll tick that off. But actually, when you spend longer in a place, you see a lot more and you appreciate a lot more. So I think that's probably been like the big learning curve for us, is like knowing how to travel, which sounds a bit silly, but I think for everyone that does this for any kind of period of time, you need to kind of find what works for you. And I do think it'll be quite different for most people.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a thing. We're both planners by nature, and kind of living in a van and doing a trip like this inherently is kind of more leans towards that kind of, obviously there's certain planning you do, but day to day, if you're in a van, you can just go, oh, well, let's just go there instead, or oh, I really like it here, I'll spend some more time here. And I think that definitely took a lot of getting used to for us. We're very used to being like, okay, well, we've got this 9 to 5 job, so in 8 months' time, we're going to do a 2-week trip, and we're going to go here, and we're going to spend 3 days here and 4 days here. And yeah, you don't really live in that way once you live in a van. So we kind of, I guess, went from like macro planning to micro planning, and it's like, okay, well, let's spend a couple of weeks here, and then you feel like you get to know the area, you get to know the community. It feels like you get to know a place in a much deeper way. And if you end up not liking it there, or you feel like you want to move on, like, that's okay, and you can change your plans. But I think for us, having some form of plan to kind of know at least what we're maybe expecting to do helps both of us, I think.
Yeah, and certainly if you're working on the road as well, having a bit of a plan and an idea of when you're going to be working is really helpful. Whether if that's for your own sanity or that of the people that you work with, trying to find times for meetings. I mean, that's probably our day-to-day biggest challenge. There's
We've got
people
on
all over literally all over the world.
5 or 6 different time zones. So anywhere from kind of West Coast US to people who are currently in the Philippines, which I think is a 15-hour time difference. So yeah, it can definitely, it requires flexibility on kind of everyone's front. And I think on that piece, like, we give our employees like a lot of flexibility to kind of work how is best for them, but it kind of goes both ways, and every so often someone might have to have a meeting at 10:30 at night because that's the only time that's going to mean everyone can make it. So yeah, I think there's probably a piece of, if you are working on the road, like having flexibility in a few different ways is kind of useful. I think
we're also kind of still kind of big advocates and believers that this is actually just a better way of living. I think is a broader statement. I think the 9 to 5 1 hour commute at the end of each at the end of the day is just battering, and it's just not a long-term sustainable thing mentally. I don't think it's a good thing in the slightest. And I think trying to shake that up and find new and better ways of working is kind of, I mean, the pandemic kind of gave everyone a bit of a kick up the arse on that, and people have started to do things differently, but we need to make sure we don't go back to what's easy and conventional, because it's not necessarily better.
You touched on something there that I think is very important. You said not to go back to easy. This lifestyle is simple, but it's not easy.
For sure.
I completely agree.
And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where everything has a cost. Yeah. The cost of this lifestyle is that you may be in, well, it's supposed to be 15 degrees Fahrenheit tonight, which is less than zero significantly for the rest of the world. And that's the cost that I'm paying for not being in a hotel room and being in the middle of with zero neighbors and thousands of acres, thousands to myself. That's my cost, is that it's cold. Now, I could be down in Arizona, but frankly, that's why we went north. We're tired of Arizona right now. But yeah, it's not an easy life, but it is a simple life. And I think that if people were to remember that humans as a condition exist for purpose, that purpose is not necessarily, and it can be, but it's not necessarily working for someone else. And I say this to you and myself as someone with employees, but instead think of it as working with someone. In fact, we've been doing this since 2018. The company has existed since 97. There are 3 team members we have right now who are actively pursuing becoming nomads, because we are enabling them with the way we work to allow them to do that and to have a richer life. Just like yourselves. Now, I don't know that I'll ever nomad down into Argentina. I think, frankly, I'd probably just fly. But I'm also not in a van, which, something as big as I'm in could be a little bit more challenging on some of those roads.
Yeah. I think Argentina you'd be okay, but maybe Colombia not so much.
Yeah. And the funny thing is we're probably about the same length. How long is your van?
We're 7 meters, which is maybe 20 foot-ish.
21 feet. Okay. So we're 23 feet long, but
Sure.
we're a schoolie and a truck base, which means we're very wide.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I mean, just some of those challenges. I mean, we probably have a good 1.5 feet in width on your vehicle.
Yes.
Tell us about your van a little bit. I mean, there's going to be people like, why didn't you talk about their solar or their batteries or whatever? What do you got going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So we kind of converted the van. Well, Dale's background is in kind of engineering and design, and because we were working at the time, we spent a really long time designing it and deciding what we wanted from it. We needed enough room for kind of storing all of our climbing gear and paddle boards, and we needed enough power to work and this sort of thing. So we spent a really long time kind of deciding what we wanted it to be like, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. And
Let me
I think
interject here because I employ engineers. Now they're computer engineers, but they're still engineers, software engineers. As soon as you said Dale's background is engineering, what goes through my head was, so you way overthought the problem. And then you said, so we took a really long time.
I'm going to challenge that, because I think we distributed our time on the planning side of things, and actually the build side of things, given that we didn't have a workshop or anything like that, was actually relatively quick. And in 3 years of living in the van, we've not made any changes.
I think that's the biggest thing.
That was where we really
Yeah.
won, I think.
The biggest thing from all the planning is that in 3 years of living in the van, there's nothing that we've changed, and there's nothing where we've gone, oh, we should just convert another van because of this. Like, it's just been amazing. It's been exactly what we need, and we'll probably have it for another 5, 6, 7, as long as we can before it gives up on us.
Yeah. I think as long as we don't have to drive on any more roads through Peru, I think the van should survive
Yeah.
at least another 5 years.
But we went for something fairly big, or at least in our eyes quite big. It's a long wheelbase Sprinter, so that we would have quite a big living space inside, but it is still kind of maneuverable-ish. Like, we managed to get it around most tiny towns in Europe, which is a bit of an ask, but it does the job. And we've kind of got like a decent sized kitchen, we've got a seating area where we can work, and we've got a big fixed bed, which for us was really important, so that we had the kind of storage space for climbing gear, camping, paddle boards. Like, we would have had no chance without a fixed bed.
No, I think this is the thing. Like, some listeners will kind of go, right, they've apparently got the best layout and the best design ever. I'm going to go and have a look at that, and I'm going to copy it. But crucially, it works for us, and it probably wouldn't work for most people. And I think that's really the beauty of converting your own vehicle. You can just tailor it exactly to how you want it. You don't need to fall into this situation that like motorhome and RV manufacturers have got, where it's ludicrously expensive for them to have 10, 15, 20 different layouts. So they compromise and consolidate and have two. And they're trying to meet the needs of millions of different people with millions of different needs, wants, and ideas in a layout or two, which is just never going to work and won't work for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, and I think on a similar vein, like, our electrical system worked perfectly for us, but we've kind of got a slightly weird use case where we will do a long drive, but then we'll stay in one place, sometimes for more than a week, because it's a climbing spot. And so we'll be like, great, we're here now, we'll work, we'll climb, and we literally won't drive anywhere. So it means that we need to recharge from solar, and then we've got a long drive every so often to recharge from driving. So we've got quite a big battery bank in case maybe it's not so sunny. But then kind of looking at other people's use cases, like if you're doing more driving, or maybe you go to a campsite occasionally, there's so many different kind of permutations, and it shouldn't be that people just need to pick between kind of 5 different options. And that is kind of what gave birth to the other, or the main kind of part of our business, which is around kind of designing campervan electrical systems. Off the back of writing the book, we'd spent a lot of time researching to make sure that what we were including was correct. And because we've got kind of technical backgrounds as well, it made sense for us to kind of go down that path. And once again, it was fairly organic, and we weren't kind of trying to come up with an idea for a business. It was more just like, people need help with this and we can help them, so let's help them. And what we ended up doing was kind of designing and kind of curating this system that calculates what somebody needs in a way that's not extremely time heavy on the engineer, but it is very bespoke. And so we don't just have 10 systems that we recommend to people. There's probably thousands of iterations of different size solar arrays and battery banks and methods of charging and this sort of thing. But we've built this kind of almost a piece of software so that we can take people's kind of responses to fairly fluffy questions about where are they going to travel and how are they going to travel, so they're not having to try and understand something very technical, but then we can take those answers and we can design someone a system that is completely perfect for them. They're not paying any more than they need to, they're not having something that's under spec, it's going to perform exactly how they need it to. And yeah, that's kind of our aim, and it relates back to that point where we really do believe that people shouldn't be pigeonholed into kind of just picking an option because they're just the options available. For a van, for an electrical system, it is a really bespoke thing, and a lot of people travel in really different ways, and so there are just going to be a lot of different kind of answers and outcomes for the different ways in which people travel.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's funny, you said you've never had to change anything in your van. I can't imagine that. This is our second bus. In fact, we just bought a third bus, which is even bigger than the one we have now, because we're considering full timing versus 3/4 timing.
Sure.
And we actually have a fourth bus on our property right now that we're building for a missionary family. And you're right, all the needs are different. So our first bus, that was Beatrice, which was a 5-window van base. So it, same length as your van. And we used that for 3 years and had no toilet. We just didn't have the need because of the way we were traveling. And we were coming from a backpacking camping background. So for us, taking care of nature in nature was not a big deal.
Sure.
Then, realistically, then Amanda, my wife, decided that she was done with that and wanted a toilet. So we bought the 6-window so that we would have room for it, but we still don't have plumbing.
Sure.
We don't have running water. We've got 2 7-gallon containers of water that we use to store water and get our water to make our coffee or our tea or, food and all that. We don't have a built-in stove. We use a camping stove. We do have a refrigerator, 2 of them actually. But I think you guys are similar in that we both have 800 amp hours. Is that correct? Is that how much battery you have?
We've got about half
400?
of that.
Yeah.
400?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our actual usage is actually relatively low. The main draws for us are 2 fridges and Starlink being the real...
Yeah, Starlink. Yeah, us too.
Kind of continuous power drain.
And I think...
and actual continual source of problems, actually, unfortunately.
I think probably for us, one of the main things is that with the climbing, we're always kind of hunting out fairly good weather, and so we do pretty much always have solar to rely on to kind of keep us topped up.
And I think that this comes back to the whole use case thing, because if we were skiers, like, our setup would not work for us, or it just wouldn't work. Like, we wouldn't have sufficient solar to deal with like adverse solar yield. We don't generally try and drive that much. So recharging on B2Bs wouldn't be enough. So there needs to be, it'd be an entirely different setup if we are where you are at the moment in what sounds like unbelievably cold conditions.
It is cold. Luckily, I mean, we have a diesel heater, so it's actually quite comfortable as long as we're inside the bus.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to make sure I get to this real quick. Everyone who's listening, this is the book right here. And I didn't read the whole book, but I did review it, and it's very well thought out. It was clearly written by people who are technical, so well done. And you do talk about a lot of things that a lot of people may not think about if they're not doing their research thoroughly. And that could be as simple as a bus bar or proper crimping tools.
For sure.
And the reason I bring up the crimping tools is that I had a solar issue last October in Moab. And that solar issue literally boiled down to I used pliers, not proper crimping tools.
Yeah.
So
as electrical tips, don't skip on the tools
Yeah.
that you use. Like the
no, and I
vibration
agree.
will completely.
Well, and that's what would happen. We were driving down the road, and the MPPT controller, which is a Victron, which is the only brand I recommend, was registering float, but I knew we weren't at float. I knew we weren't. So I was like, what is going on here? And what I figured out was as I was testing some of the wires, and one of my wires had come loose. So it didn't have a proper connection to actually give me proper information.
Yeah. And I think especially in North America as well, actually, like in Europe, we've never really dealt with the vibrations we dealt with driving in North America. I think we were quite worried about the roads in South America, but actually some of the roads in the US are like, I'm sure that the phrase like washboard road will resonate with most people listening.
It will certainly
we
resonate.
really learned what a washboard road was, and I think the very first one we drove down, some of our plug sockets like basically unscrewed themselves, because as you go down the screws are just like spinning and it's quite incredible the damage it can do.
Yeah, it's something that was an education for us. We do not have that in Europe.
2 years of Europe and our van was looking like basically new, and a year in the Americas and it looks pretty ropey now.
Yeah, it's had a hard
I mean, let's be fair. Europe's got a good 1,700 years of road building.
Yes.
And also, what a lot of people don't know, I mean, even US people don't get this, is that the United States is, yes, we're a country, but each state is very independent. Much as there is federal observation and rules and laws, by far the majority of laws are local, and that includes budgeting. So it depends on whatever culture of whatever state. And I can tell you for a fact, I'm sure you encountered this, the culture of Florida or Georgia is completely different than Iowa or Washington. Yeah. And they have different priorities and goals and all that type of thing. One of the reasons I enjoy the truck base that we have is that it's much more durable. I mean, I've taken this bus places, I've actually watched 4x4 sprinters turn around and look at me like I've lost my mind as I go off into the place where they weren't even willing to try. But I mean, that's why it also weighs as much as it does, because of the framing and the suspension and things like that. So you have this, you used to be, forgive me, I don't remember, I know you're about ready to rebrand, and you said Noma was the new one. What is that all about?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we had this like difficult birth as a company because we named ourselves Climbing Van, which was a mistake.
Although you can see where that came from.
Yeah, it came from an Instagram handle, because that's all it was ever really intended to be. We legally had to register as a company to be able to sell the book into Europe, thanks to Brexit.
We won't go there.
We won't go there on that one.
I got all kinds of comments we can go there with.
Yeah, this is gonna be a long show. So yeah, we had this kind of like legal obligation to become a company just to sell a book. So we became a company, and we've already kind of spoken about the service that we now kind of provide, but we always had this kind of rubbish Instagram handle, website name. So it only feels appropriate that we kind of made our mind up about what we wanted to be called and pick a name that was more reflective of what we do as a business now. So Noma, which is NOHMA.com, is it's like a shortened version of words like nomadic, and the other thing is that So NOMA with the middle letters being OHM is resistance or electrical resistance. And we kind of felt like, oh, it's got a nice reference back to the electrical side of things. And then if we pick the first and the last letters, we can have no resistance adventure, which felt like an appropriate kind of motto, really.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And so, just to circle back, the idea here is that, are you designing complete vans or just the electrical power systems?
Yeah, so our focus is kind of on the electrical systems. The book is covers the entire van, so it's all about how to convert a van, pick a van life, like covers everything, small vans, big vans, anything you want to do. But then the business itself focus on the electrical systems, so we'll kind of design a complete electrical system, and we will provide every single component that's needed to install it. So you would receive a box, or maybe a few boxes, with all your components in, and then you would receive a wiring diagram and installation guide from us. That would come after some kind of back and forth with one of our engineers about exactly how you're going to use your system to make sure that the system that we're designing is right for you. And then it's almost like a bit of a kind of IKEA instruction manual. Join everything up and follow the instructions, and there's an engineer on hand to help if you have any questions. So it's for those people who are kind of doing their own conversion and wanting to do things themselves, but they also don't want to make that investment, kind of like what you were talking about earlier with the cost of things. It's like a really big time investment to get the electrics right. There's just so many things to consider, and there's a lot of unknown unknowns that you wouldn't necessarily know to think of until you've maybe installed something and something's gone wrong, and then you realize that there was this thing that you didn't consider. And so what we're kind of trying to do is remove all of that time that's needed, and we just make a commission on the product. So we're not even charging for the service. It's completely free as long as the full system's purchased through us. It means we can make a commission on those products, and we can offer the system essentially for the same as if you went and bought it from elsewhere, but you've got that kind of support, you've got that wiring diagram to follow, and you know that what you're installing is correct and safe.
Now that's interesting. So being a consultant is what I do. That's not the approach I would have taken. I'm not saying it's wrong. Don't get me wrong. I actually find this ingenious. So basically, you are top tier support engineering at no cost to your client, as long as they purchase the whole system from you, because then the manufacturers pay you.
Yes, essentially that's how it works. We like to almost refer to it as like old-fashioned retail. Those days when you could walk into a camera shop and there's a nerdy guy there with holding 20 cameras and knows everything about every camera and what is going to be absolutely perfect for you. But unfortunately, what's happened with everything going online is that a lot of that kind of expertise has just been lost. And it's this race to the bottom. Who's cheapest? Look on Amazon and never look anywhere else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So we've tried to answer that by guaranteeing that we will be the same price as what you could find anywhere else, but bringing a whole lot more value.
Yeah, and by providing every single component, then it makes it viable to operate in the way that we're working. And we kind of have considered different models, but this seems to be working for us. And so it feels nice because it means that we're not kind of putting a price on it, and it's not like, oh, well, some people maybe can't afford to do it. It's like, as long as you're buying kind of decent quality components, like you mentioned Victron earlier, that's what we kind of base our systems around. As long as you're going for that kind of like good quality system, not like absolute budget everything, then we can help, and you don't need to be paying hundreds of pounds, dollars extra to kind of access that support and make sure that your system's safe.
Yeah, and I think the safety thing is ultimately the biggest, most important thing. It's YouTube and other and Instagram and all of the other social media platforms do a really good job of making stuff look really simple. And there'll be people stood up there saying something quite convincing, and you're like, great, okay, it's that simple. I'll just copy exactly what they've done. Unfortunately, the reality is a lot of the people making these videos and doing these things are not particularly well versed in physics and electrical engineering. And if anyone that's listening thinks electrical systems are simple, you're either an electrical engineer or you're wrong. Unfortunately, it is a complicated thing.
Yeah.
And I guarantee we've surveyed hundreds and hundreds of people, and as to how they would have gone about designing a system if they hadn't bought it from us. And some of the mistakes are painful and dangerous, is unfortunately the situation. And that's not really the fault of the consumer. It's a kind of arguably quite boring, nerdy thing to have to invest your time into. And it is hundreds of hours to, starting from scratch, to be able to design a system, understand it, make sure it's safe, and make sure that it's fit for purpose. And when you've got life and a van or a vehicle to convert, do you really want to spend those extra hundreds of hours guaranteeing that it's right? Inevitably, people cut corners and make mistakes, and that's what we want to avoid.
I think the other thing it comes back to as well. Oh, sorry. Is
no, it's okay.
It's like what Dale was kind of saying with, maybe some of these people who are on YouTube or who've written a blog, like they do have a system that's safe, but ultimately if you're just copying someone else's system, the chances are that it's not going to be right for you. Exactly. And you're either going to end up with something that's under spec and it's not going to perform it how you need it to, or you're going to end up spending a lot more money than you need to. And
that's the worst solution, really, is I don't understand it, so I'm just going to spend an enormous amount of money so my system's so vastly overspec'd that I'll never conceivably ever have a problem. That's
it might
not
work for some people. But
I was like, now hold on, I resemble that. I just...
I mean, there's yeah.
No, so a couple of things here I want to touch on as we're starting to run out of time. One, you made a good point about this kind of race to the bottom, or just buy whatever's popular on Amazon or whatever. And I think there's some validity to that, but I think part of the problem is that a lot of people don't even know what the question is to ask.
Exactly.
Right? They know they need solar, but they don't know what that means. Right. Yeah. And then you have the situation where you go on YouTube or you go on Facebook, and then you've got your, armchair experts that just tear into people for not actually understanding. And they're trying to understand, but because, and pardon my French, they're basically just assholes on Facebook. They're hurt, they really beat up on people. There's that. And then there's, the other people that don't, and Charlie, I think you'll appreciate this, being from physics. I watched a video where, I'm 50 years old, so I scream at the TV. I watched a video and I was screaming at this video because these two young ladies, bless their heart, added a co-pilot seat. The co-pilot seat was made out of wood, and the co-pilot seat was secured with drywall screws. They were literally one short stop, hard press on the brake from sending whoever was sitting in that seat through the windshield. And I watched another couple, a young couple, building their van using drywall screws for the wood. And those washboard roads you were talking about? You hit washboard roads where your walls are held up with drywall screws and your walls are going to fall in on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right? And so on the one end, I appreciate their initiative and their ingeniousness of, okay, I just need a screw. But screws have different diameters and different thread depths and different tension strengths for a reason. But a lot of people don't know that.
Exactly.
And I mean, you've completely hit the nail on the head here, because most people have every intention of doing it right and giving it their best stab, and like ultimately you're spending a lot of money and a lot of time trying to build something to live in. Like, you don't really want to get catapulted out of the windscreen if you break because you've used the wrong sort of screws. And this is where it's like, yeah, you should absolutely build your own van. Like, what an amazing achievement, and and something to do together as well is a brilliant thing. But don't be afraid to tap into the expertise of someone that spends every single minute of every single day in that particular area. Tap into their knowledge and then apply it yourself.
Yeah, I think one thing we've always said as like a bit of a piece of advice to people converting their own van is, it's like, once again, coming back to this like cost of everything, and there's like monetary cost and there's time, and like if there's things that you're nervous about doing, it's okay to use an expert for one specific part of your build, and that doesn't devalue the fact that you've done the rest of your build yourself. Like, I know a lot of people are nervous about the kind of propane system, and if you want someone to just install that for you, absolutely do it, because if that enables you to do the rest of your van, great. And once you start to work out hourly wages and the amount of time it will take you as someone who's never done that before versus the amount of time it will take someone who does it every single day, they do kind of start to balance out. So I think that's a kind of really big thing to remember when you are doing that, is that you don't need to do every single thing, and that's okay.
No, and just for some of our listeners, I don't think that precludes the fact that some people just can't afford to do that. But that being,
For sure.
but that being said, there is also something to being said to seeking help when you don't know, because the ultimate cost is your or a loved one's life. So don't blow yourself up, right?
Or fire yourself through the windscreen, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Before we close out, I do want to make mention of one thing. I'm looking at in your book on page 28, just because I am a schoolie owner, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, wait, that's not correct. Just to pick on you a little bit, and please know I have written a book, and I have been published literally hundreds of times. I know the effort this took. This is not to take away from your effort here, but if there's ever a second edition, you have the height listed as 72 inches for a mini schoolie and 72 inches for a mid-sized schoolie. My schoolie is 76 inches high. The schoolie I just bought is 76 inches high, and mini schoolies are actually less than 72 inches high on the inside. Just as a heads up, I had to pick on you a little bit because you're in Argentina, and I wish I was enjoying the food you were. But folks, Van Conversion Bible, I kid you not, I haven't read the whole thing, but everything I've looked at in here is solid. I recommend it for anybody who's trying to learn. It's not perfect, as I just pointed out, but it's probably the best compendium of overall knowledge that you would need to build out a proper vehicle. So I recommend it. Also, they are not climbing van anymore. They are Nohma, Nohma.com. And I hope that you will, if you need them, seek them out, follow them on whatever various channels you've got. Ignore TikTok, it's poison. And other than that, what was that?
That was unanimous.
Yeah,
unanimous. Yeah, TikTok is poison. It just is. And I say, Skooliepalooza has a TikTok channel because you kind of have to, but it's not where we live. But yeah, it's poison. I invite everyone to get out there, enjoy themselves, and have a great life. And with that, this has been episode 4 of the Skooliepalooza podcast with Charlie and Dale. We hope to have you on again.
Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, good to talk.